text is found in John 10:1-35. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, is the same as a thief and a robber. But he that entereth by the door is the shepherd of the sheep, and to him the porter openeth. And the shepherd, or the sheep, hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before him, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger they will not follow, but will flee from, for they know not the voice of a stranger. As we look around the world today, we can hear the voices of many strangers, the voices of influence that try to distract us from our good shepherd, voices of culture, voices of social media, fear, and doubt. But the Bible says to be still and know he is God. You have to find a place to blot out all the distractions and all the chaos that will try to hinder you from hearing the voice of God. But before I talk about being still and hearing the voice of God, let's talk about some voices, some of these strangers' voices, some of these voices that would try to pull us away. The first voice I want to talk about is the voice of distraction. Distraction means to prevent someone from giving their full attention to something. If the devil cannot kill you, he will distract you. If he cannot get you to do obvious sins like drinking and drugs, then he will get you to do little stuff. The Bible says the little foxes spoil the vine. He will try to get you to be distracted and try to hinder you from your daily devotions by trying to grab your attention with other things. This reminds me of a story found in Matthew 14:22-34. But for time's sake, I'm just going to paraphrase the story. So after Jesus gets done doing this great miracle of feeding the 5,000, he goes on a mountain to pray, and he tells his disciples to sail across the sea. And as the disciples are crossing the sea, the Bible says a great storm came, and the Bible says that the boat was tossed with waves, and that the wind blew the ship. And Jesus came by night walking on the sea. This part sticks out to me because the disciples were distracted on the storms around them, and they weren't ready for God to move. They were distracted on the waves and how bad the wind was, and they did not expect or see the miracle of Jesus walking on the water until after he begins to talk to them. This reminds me of a verse in 1 Peter 5:8, where it says to be sober and be diligent, for your adversary the devil is as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. You have to be sober and diligent. You have to be paying attention and dedicated in the word, not distracted, to see what God's moving in and to see how God's moving, and if the enemy's trying to get you. There's two reasons the devil wants to distract you. It's one, so you can't see the plan of God and what he has for you, and it's also so you won't see his attack. The Bible says that the disciples, they argued amongst themselves if it was a spirit or a ghost, and they were distracted by their storm to see God's plan. But Jesus said, be of good cheer, it is I. And Peter said, if it's you, let me come unto you. And Jesus said to come. So Peter begins to walk on the water, and as he's walking towards Jesus, this voice of distraction begins to talk to him. And Peter looks around and he sees the waves, and he sees the waves and the wind, and he begins to be afraid. And he begins to take his eyes off Jesus. He takes his eyes off the mission. Peter did not do a horrible sin as drinking or alcohol or perversion, but he just did a simple thing. He began to take his eyes off the master. He took his eyes off the mission. And he begins to sink. His storm begins to overtake him. And he cries out to Jesus, and Jesus saves him. Though Peter was distracted, he managed to get his eyes back on Jesus. He managed to refocus and get his eyes back on the mission. If you've ever wandered astray or been distracted, Jesus is still here with open arms, calling for you. The Bible says in our earlier text in John 10:3 that the shepherd calls his sheep by name and he leadeth them out. The Bible says we all like sheep have wandered astray, but He's calling us back. He's leading us out of our distraction and back towards the cross. The second voice I want to talk about is this voice of anxiety. Anxiety is something that many people face. It brings fear, worry, and nervousness. It whispers, it won't work, you're not good enough, no one's listening, no one cares. Though anxiety tries to say these things that try to fill your head, you have to remember what the shepherd says. Shepherds do not have to scream aggressively to get their sheep to follow them. They have a comforting, commanding voice. The Bible says that, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Jesus does not have to scream at you aggressively, but his voice, the gentle voice of the shepherd, will ease anxiety. God is not mad at you, and he's not yelling at you aggressively. He's not wanting to seek bad for you, but the shepherd, he brings peace and comfort to his sheep. The Bible says in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says God, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." God is not mad at you. When anxiety says you have no future, God says, "I have a plan." When anxiety says you're alone, the shepherd says, "I am with you." The Bible says in John 10:11 that Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep." He also said that he came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. God is not mad at you or trying to kill you, but in fact, he says you're more than an overcomer. The shepherd, many sheep, when they wander off the path, the shepherd sometimes has to redirect them. It's not because he's mad at them or trying to kill them or get rid of them out of the herd, but it's to lead them back on the path. Sometimes we confuse anxiety with God being mad at us, but anxiety is trying to distract us, but Jesus is calling us back to the herd. Like I had said earlier, that he leads us out. Now, this third voice I want to talk about is the greatest voice. It's the voice of the shepherd. So I've talked about just two many voices that try to lead us away from God, but I want to talk about this voice that does bring love, comfort, and peace. It's the voice of Jesus. Like I said earlier, he leads you back from distractions. He calms anxiety and nerves. But to hear the voice of Jesus, you have to be in a place where you can hear the voice. Earlier, I had mentioned in Psalms 46 that God said to be still and know that he is God. There's a story in the Bible of Elijah when he's running. He goes to a cave and he hears a whirlwind and he hears fire, an earthquake, but it's a still small voice that ends up bringing comfort to him. Sometimes you have to blot out and try to block out all the distractions and hindrances that will try to keep you from hearing the shepherd. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus tells his disciples to go into their closets to pray, and one of the reasons I believe he told them this was to get rid of those distractions and hindrances, to find a secret place where you can talk to Jesus, and so he can talk to you. And it's in those secret places that you can hear the voice of Jesus, where he leads you and guides you in his plans for your life. The last thing I want to leave with you is it's never too late to hear the voice of Jesus. It's never too late to hear the voice of this shepherd. But he's talking, but are you listening? Sometimes we do get distracted, or anxiety tries to overtalk the voice of this shepherd. But when we find a place where we can hear God's voice, we find the plan and comfort that he's trying to lead and guide us in. Jesus said, Jesus wants a relationship with you. Shepherds have a relationship with the sheep. Sheep are not like cattle. You don't just throw them into a field, but you have to be with them quite frequently, and you have to have a relationship with them. God does want this relationship with you. He wants to talk to you, but are you listening?